This is Mark J. Boone, Assistant Professor in the Department of Religion and Philosophy at Hong Kong Baptist University. This is a video abstract from my article, Ancient Future Hermeneutics, Postmodernism, Biblical Inerrancy, and the Rule of Faith, an article published in Criswell Theological Review in the year 2016. This article grows out of some reading I was doing in the year 2004. At the time, I was a double major in Biblical Studies and Philosophy at Dallas Baptist University. On the one hand, I'd been studying the doctrine of biblical inerrancy under Dr. William Bell, who was one of the authors and signers of the Chicago Statement on Biblical Inerrancy. On the other hand, at the time I was reading Jean-Luc Marion's God Without Being by a French Catholic philosopher, and it's a book that borrows some insights from postmodern philosophy, Nietzsche, Heidegger, and tries to apply them to Christianity. If you're familiar with the Egyptian gold analogy, where Augustine says Christians can get insights from the Platonists and liberate them from their pagan context and use them in the service of the true faith, much as the Hebrews did with the gold of the Egyptians, liberating it from the Egyptians, plundering the Egyptians, and then using it for the worship of the true God. We're doing something like that in Marion. And I might mention also, one of the better lines I had one time was, "Don't turn your Egyptian gold into an idol halfway to Canaan." And this is very much what Marion was about, because what Heidegger is doing, following Nietzsche, is critiquing intellectual idolatry. And Marion talks about this and says this is useful insight for Christian theology. The intellectual idea of God as being, which is historically largely an idea of God ushered in by philosophy to complete a philosophical system, is not a very good idea of God. It's not a biblical idea of God. It's a philosophical concept of God. It's not a God, Heidegger says, that you can worship before. And Marion thinks this is very useful insight for Christians. And Marion, in this book, God Without Being, does some biblical hermeneutics, and he talks about how the meaning of the Bible transcends the intentions of its author. So I read this as someone who's been studying biblical inerrancy with a bit of discomfort, because biblical inerrancy emphasizes the inerrancy and the importance of the original meaning that intended by the human authors. And Marion is saying the biblical meaning is not limited to this. Well, I realized what was perhaps obvious, that these are totally consistent positions. The Chicago Statement on Biblical Inerrancy teaches that the original meaning that intended by the human authors of the Bible is without error. And Marion says the biblical meaning is not limited to this. So I thought I needed to write a paper on it. It became my bachelor's thesis on the consistency of this thesis from Marion and this thesis from the Chicago Statement on Biblical Inerrancy. Silly me, the whole thing had already been written in Augustine. I realized later, rereading the Confessions, that everything I'd said was always already there in Augustine. My bachelor's thesis had barely mentioned Augustine at all. Well, this paper does. In this particular article, Ancient Future Hermeneutics, Postmodernism, Biblical Inerrancy, and the Rule of Faith, I go over the Marion, I go over the inerrancy, and I go over the Augustine, and I show how he combines and integrates these theological and philosophical ideas that you find in the postmodern philosophical philosophy of religion tradition, and in the evangelical theological tradition of biblical inerrancy. I recommend this article for anyone interested in biblical hermeneutics. I recommend it for anyone interested in the relationship of Christian theology and postmodern philosophy. The article should be available, as usual, on my academia.edu profile. Thanks for watching.